Hollywood, the home of the rich and the famous, the birthplace of cinema. The glamour, the riches, and the lifestyles leave us hanging on their every moment. But not all of its secrets are the glitzy success stories they seem. In fact, Hollywood, whilst propelling some to superstardom, has chewed up and spat out more ambitious hopefuls than you or I have had hot dinners. It has been host to scandal, murder, crime, and every inch of it has a secret to spill, if somebody's listening. Some of those will go to the grave, and some are already talking from beyond it. Hollywood has always been home to the devious, whether it be money-pinching studios, payroll drug dealers, shady fixers, mobsters, or simply stars with too much money and little to no inhibitions. It's time to peek behind the curtain. Let's take a look at some of the ghosts of the past and what macabre tales they have to tell. Errol Leslie Thompson Flynn was an Australian actor who achieved worldwide fame during the golden age of Hollywood. He was known for his romantic swashbuckler roles, frequent partnerships with Olivia de Havilland, and reputation for his womanizing and hedonistic personal life. To celebrate his good fortune in filmland, Flynn designed his dream house, a playhouse, he called it. He bought 11.5 acres in the Hollywood Hills off Mulholland Drive and, in 1941, built the sprawling farmhouse. An unbroken line of windows provided a panoramic view of the city below. He called it Mulholland Farm. Flynn built Mulholland Farm with secret passages and peepholes, two-way mirrors in the bathrooms, and a crawl space above one bedroom that allowed him a full view of the bed. This was something of an open secret in Hollywood, and surely some of his guests took it on themselves to entertain their host. But how many more toweled off in front of the mirror or stretched out on the bed, unaware of his invisible, peeping presence? The invisible, all-seeing, heavy-breathing spirit of the master of Mulholland Farm sounds like the plot of some bad horror movie. According to Insider, the owner of the house after Errol Flynn's death began to notice unusual things. In 1980, the singer-songwriter Ricky Nelson bought the property, and it wasn't long before he too began to feel weird and uncanny currents in the air at Mulholland Farm. The house was notorious for reasons more perverse than the odd drunken punch-up or harsh tongue-lashing. Flynn was something of a satyr, with an insatiable appetite for women, even if they were underage and uninterested. Flynn has been described as wild and restless. Is it possible that the house he put his energy into building became exactly like its owner? All the heroes in one magnificent, sexy animal package. That's what Jack Warner called him. A scoundrel with an irresistible twinkle in his eye, Errol Flynn was what every woman wanted and what every man wanted to be. He was put on trial for murder, prone to violent outbursts, racist remarks, and accused of statutory rape, being a Nazi spy and a sadist. He slapped a member of the press over an article involving his beloved dog in a tussle which resulted in him being stabbed in the ear with an oyster fork. That's just the stories that made it to press. By all accounts, Ricky Nelson loved living in Errol Flynn's home. The swashbuckling superstar had some high times in the Hollywood Hills, lots of wine, women, and song. Nelson was no slouch in that department either. The teen idol turned pop legend felt a strong kinship with the spirit of Flynn, and perhaps Flynn felt it too. His spirit, or someone's, may have even tried to warn Rick of his tragic fate. In 1959, 19-year-old Ricky Nelson was driving teenage girls crazy on both the big and small screen. He joined his parents and brother David on radio's The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet at age 4. The show moved to television in 1952 and ran 14 years. During that time, the world watched Ricky transform from irksome teen to rock music idol. Eventually, he married and had his own family. In 1977, he found the perfect home for them. He bought the Flynn estate from country and western artist Stuart Hamblin, the only other owner. Rick and his wife, actress Chris Nelson, moved into the Mulholland home with their 4 children just 18 years after Flynn's demise. In particular, Nelson's daughter, Tracy, would often feel a presence in the house when she was alone. The house was a 2-story ranch house. It wasn't oversized or grandiose in any way, but it was sprawling, daughter Tracy said. The front door was in a place where it shouldn't have been, so we never used it. And because of that, I never really felt that the house had a heart, had a center. I would usually just come in and go straight up to my room. My bedroom used to be Beverly Odlin's, and we used to always smell this funky perfume, a really cheap perfume. All sorts of weird things went on. My shower door would open and close in the middle of the night. The toilet would flush. My shades would roll up for no reason. The ghost in her room felt distinctly feminine. Ms. Odland is still living. Could it have been her mother? Instinctively, Tracy felt it was an older presence. This is going to sound so crazy, but it didn't feel like a young, naive girl. It felt like a cynical presence. A cynical woman in Flynn's house? That could have been any number of women Flynn had loved and forfeited. Whoever or whatever was there, her friends felt it too. When I was going to school, girls would have slumber parties, but nobody would stay at my house. To me, it was like having a pet, like, oh well, it's just that weird energy in the house. Rick and Chris Nelson's home life did not quite mirror the happy family we saw on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. The couple was plagued by problems, and in the early 80s, Chris moved out with the twin boys. The youngest son went to live with Chris' mother, whilst Tracy remained with her father. I was doing square pegs at the time. One night, I arrived home from work. It was dark. I looked up at the dining room and the light was on, and there was a man standing in the dining room. I thought, oh, Pop's home. I went upstairs and called him. No answer. His car's not there and there's nobody's there. Then the phone rang, and it's Pop calling from the road to say he'd be home tomorrow. Tracy told him what she'd just seen, and Rick replied, oh, that's just Errol. The following day, Tracy came home from work while it was still light out. She went straight to her room to read. After a few minutes, there was a noise from downstairs. It sounded like someone had broken in. My father had a room below mine full of his gold records and awards, all hanging on the walls. It sounded like whoever was down there was smashing all the gold records and all Dad's stuff. And I remember thinking, oh my God, take anything, but don't take those. I hid myself in the closet and I waited for the noise to stop. It was really loud. The house was shaking. It sounded like people were throwing things against the walls, breaking chairs, and breaking glass. The sun finally went down. It had been quiet for a while, and I thought it was finally safe to go downstairs. Tracy expected to find the place in shambles, but there was no broken glass, no smashed furniture. Instead, all the lights had been turned on. 2 pet cats were in Rick's bedroom, and the door had been locked from the inside. Nothing else in the house had been touched. Tracy decided then and there to move out. A short time later, after she'd moved into her own apartment, Rick and his girlfriend called her one night. The weirdest thing happened, they told her. We were downstairs and we heard all this noise coming from your room. We thought we were being robbed. Things were crashing and breaking. We called the police, ran outside down the driveway, and waited for them to come. When they got here, the couple continued, they went upstairs to investigate. Your door was locked from the inside. When they opened it, they discovered that all the lights in the room had been turned on, but not a thing had been touched. Ricky's theory? That's just Errol. He became so accustomed to the auditory spells that his reference to Flynn's ghost became almost casual, as if a friend had stopped by to cause carnage and left. The ghost allegedly appeared again when Nelson's son, Gunnar, claimed to have caught a glimpse of Flynn sitting on the edge of his bed, according to author Robert Mattson. Family guests saw him too, particularly in the wing of the house where Flynn kept his rooms. Children of friends would inexplicably avoid these areas, but could not articulate why. Gunnar himself described the house as alive. If it were a person, it's not a good one. One night, Rick decided to throw a party. Tracy, already tired, decided to go upstairs to lie down. But once in the comfort of her bed, she suddenly feels like she can't move or breathe. Her efforts to get up, virtually dragging herself to the landing, cause her to fall down the stairs. When she gets to the bottom, all she can hear is laughter. This rings eerily similar to a tale from Flynn's earliest days. When Flynn decided that acting was his calling, he moved to Britain to get started. He soon began working and studying the craft, but just as it had at every school he attended, his time there came to a disturbing and sudden end. Just months after arriving, the company fired him after he got into a quarrel with a female stage manager, and shoved her down a set of stairs, chuckling after. "I've tried to figure it out," Tracy said. "There was a lot of really wacky stuff going on in terms of drug usage in the house when I was growing up. I believe all that stuff creates energetic chaos. I don't know what else to call it. So it was a wacky place to live anyway." Then compound that with the history of the place. Tracy has a theory about the two explosive, smashing episodes. Perhaps Flynn or the cynical woman were trying to warn Rick of impending tragedy. When the warnings failed and Rick was killed at age 45, before his time, like Errol, the spirit turned black. Rick Nelson's death occurred on New Year's Eve, chillingly 7 years prior. When Tracy was sick one night, she awoke to hear something in another room. She went out to see what was going on, and it was Errol Flynn, as he was in his heyday. He was drinking, and he toasted her Happy New Year and vanished. This did not happen on New Year's Eve. My father's dying was such a cataclysmic thing for the family. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was. Who knows? All the women on my mother's side are very psychic. My grandmother, my mom, myself. Since I was a kid, I've always been very open to the possibility of ghosts because I always kind of felt them. All I can tell you is that it was definitely haunted. Ricky died in 1985. Prior to his tragic death at the hands of a 1944 Douglas DC-3 that once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis, his family report that he started to act increasingly strange. He began to dress only in his bathrobe, something he had rarely done. He also showed symptoms of depressive behavior. The house he loved began to decay around him, and it seems Rick mirrored it. He had for years loathed flying, but developed an obsession with planes, to the point he purchases one he believed to be the safest, and then ultimately dies in it. His sons, Matthew and Gunnar, were due to fly on that very same plane with their father, until he made a call to Gunnar the night before to ask him not to accompany him on the flight, but to instead fly commercial. This out-of-the-blue request to change plans initially confused his children, but now they wonder, did he have a foreboding sense of the danger? Rick Nelson lived in the Mulholland house until his death. Tracy recalls that the spirit in the house changed dramatically after that. It had been playful before, but after my father died, it turned malevolent. My brothers and I could literally feel when my father's presence was gone, and when he left, it just turned ugly and scary in the house. My now ex-husband always had a hard time believing any of this ghost stuff. After Dad died, we were removing some furniture, and he went outside and refused to go back in. He told me, "Something's in that house, and I don't even want to be anywhere near it." Richard Dreyfuss, Tracy's co-star in Down and Out in Beverly Hills, talked to her about buying the house, but Tracy warned him away. "It's a bad house, and it's got something bad in it." The Mulholland house stood vacant after Rick Nelson's death. During that time, darkness seemed to completely envelop the place. A gang broke in and murdered a girl in the living room. It seems that although the ghosts of the Flynn house may have finally been laid to rest, her father's spirit still lingers. When Tracy was diagnosed with cancer and treated successfully, none of it may have been possible without an intervention from beyond the grave. She tells the story of her father coming to her in a dream. "My father called me on the phone and said, 'I know you miss me, but it's not time for you to die. You have to go see a doctor.' The house itself was torn down many years ago, and the acreage divided up into separate lots, rebuilt on and subsequently sold, but Tracy still has nightmares